welcome to Midas 101 with Jim Roese. Today we're going to show you the proper startup procedure for a Midas console. This can come into play in a couple of different places. The first thing is if you're new to a brand new console. This console is wiped, so we're going to pretend it is one. When you show up to your console and you boot it for the first time, your console is going to turn into a show file like this, but there's going to be nothing saved. And if you try to save, it's going to pop up to a screen. When you try to store a scene, it's going to tell you there's nothing available, and it's not possible because you don't have a show file. In order to store a show with Midas, there's a couple of steps, and this is pretty much with every digital console. You have to have a show, and inside that show there are scenes. So in order to save a scene on your console, the first thing you need to do is create a show. So what we're going to do here is on the automation page, is we're going to click on the new button in this corner, and it's going to create a new show. Enter new show, and we'll just call it new show 1. That's what they want it to call it. What we've done now is we've created a show that now has available scenes to store to. At this point we have a show, but there's nothing in the show. So once we've made some changes into our console and we get to a point where we've done our labeling or we've done something that we want to save, we need to store this show file into a scene. Without a scene, there's an empty show. If you go to the store button on your console and you push the store button, it will ask you to store a scene. On the Midas, you need to first time click on the store to next scene, which will give you the available option to store to scene 1. Otherwise, it will tell you a warning message that you're trying to override a safe scene that you can't do. We'll just call this scene 1 and hit OK. Personally, I've got in the habit that every time I start my first scene, after I save my scene, I hit the store button again, and I change my writing process into overwrite scene, and I hit OK. This means every time I try to update this scene as I build it, it will keep overwriting scene 1 and not create multiple scenes with changes in them. So we can build our show on this scene to get it to the starting point we want to be at. Once it gets to that point, if you want to have multiple scenes for multiple bands or multiple songs, you can start making those changes at that point. This is a good place to be when you're creating your patching, your effects, your labeling, your coloring, your control groups. If you keep overwriting scene 1 until you get that to the point you want it to be, it'll give you a great starting place for your console. Once you have this scene saved in the console as scene 1 where you want it to be, say we wanted these moves to be right in here, and this is what we want our mix to be for some god-awful reason. At that point, if we store our scene and we hit overwrite again, this will now be stored in scene 1. I'll just show you if I bring my faders back down and I click on the now button, which is in scene 1 I'm in, it will pop my console back to the state it was in when I saved. Once you've saved your scene where it needs to be, you need to save, or stored your scene, you need to save your show file at that point. Now that I've saved it, the red has gone away from the save button, and that means the file that is saved on this console is active as of right now where the console sits. There's a couple things to really pay attention to in doing this, and in novice users this happens quite often. As you build your scenes and you get to your last scene and you make a lot of changes on the surface and you get it where you want it to be, then you immediately go to the save scene and you save your show. If you haven't updated your scene between the last time you made those changes and this point, your saved show will be at the last place your console is on before you stored your last scene. Always make sure that when you get done where you want to be, you store your scene at that point before you save your show file. That will put you in a safe spot. You've got a console now, you've got a show ready to go, and now on this console, if we click on the automation filing button, we now have a new show on this console that if we load this show file, the start of the show will be exactly where we left it. On this Pro 1 here, this one is a console that has a couple shows on it, or a couple of built scenes. On this one here, when we click on the automation filing, you can see there's already a couple of shows stored in the console. We were building a Sonimax file for one of our clients, and so if we click on this show file on the empty console, it will ask us to load the file. When we load it, are you sure you want to load this show? We load the show. Once the show is loaded now, there's one thing you need to realize as it loads your show into the console. It is still in the state it was in prior to loading this show file in until you load your next scene. So if you take a look at the console, nothing has changed even though we've opened the show file, and sometimes that's confusing to people that they can't understand why they loaded their show, but when they look at their show, everything is different. Nothing is correct. Everything is what it shouldn't be, and you're worried about it, and you're saying, how come everything is wrong? How come this is not what I expected it to be? Well, that's because you haven't loaded a scene. You haven't loaded a scene yet. You are still in the safe scene on this console, but you're still in the positioning of when you loaded this into the console. If we hit our next button, which is going to move us into our start scene here, boom. Now we have a console that is loaded with everything, including the patching, the labeling, the coloring of everything of the show file that we had loaded previously, and now we're active into that show. Hopefully this helps get you guys started when you've got to fire your console up for the first time. Thanks.